Welcome to the Viktor Frankl podcast. My name is Rabbi Daniel Schonbuch, licensed psychotherapist and author of a new book called Viktor Frankl and the Psychology of the Soul. I'd like to welcome a wonderful guest today. Her name is Mrs. Mindy Blumenfeld. She's a licensed clinical social worker who has significant training in various modalities of psychotherapy, including EMDR, somatic experiencing, sensory motor psychotherapy, and IFS. She's also a very talented writer, editor, and author. And we're so delighted to have you here, Mindy, to talk about your books. Now, I know about at least 3 of your books, and I've read 2 of them. The 2 books I've read, one is called Therapy Schmerapy, and the other book is called Short But Lived. They're both very different books in nature, but you're a fantastic writer. So in one book, Therapy Schmerapy, you basically encapsulate what is it like to be a therapist. It's a great book for people who are consumers of therapy to learn about what is the experience of therapy. And the other book you wrote more recently called Short But Lived is a really riveting book. It tells a story, your own story, so to speak, of the life and tragic passing of your son, Hillel. So first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor, and I'm so glad to meet you in person.
That's great. And I know I sent you a copy of Viktor Frankl and the Psychology of the Soul. You wrote a wonderful post on LinkedIn. Just tell us more about what you discovered in my book as a therapist.
I want to tell you, I picked it up on Shabbos, and I was simply blown away. I must have literally, I didn't stop reading it until I finished it. I didn't put it down until I finished the whole entire book. It was, okay, so first of all, it was really well written. It was like a well-written, fast-paced book. It had everything in it, and succinctly, and great stories, great transcripts of client and therapist talking to each other. And I loved how you encapsulated Viktor Frankl's work. And I also loved how you had quotes. Like you pulled out, Dr. Frankl's quotes and you put them into your book. They were such beautiful quotes that you had pulled out, and that together with how you put it together. So honestly, I'm just so enthusiastic about your book. I'm just going to talk about your book first, okay? So here's what it is. You had started off your book saying that, and I love this line, that psychotherapy, everyone, therapists think that we need to dig deeper in psychotherapy, go back to your past, and from an existential way of looking at it, it's not about digging deeper, it's about going higher. And then you spoke about meaning, that how what will make a person heal from their trauma is to make meaning of their suffering and subsequently their life, which is obviously based on Viktor Frankl's teaching, but you really elucidated it in such a contemporary, easy to understand, relevant way. I think that was such a gift of your book. It was really, really, really a fabulous book. I'm telling you, if you would see my library, I have literally hundreds and hundreds of therapy books. This is probably one of the best ones that I've read, because I have to tell you, in my work as a therapist, not that obviously we don't push meaning on our clients, even though you might be luckier because people who come to you automatically know that you're a Viktor Frankl person. So they automatically know that when the kind of therapy they're coming to do with you will be meaning related, versus people will come to me, they say, okay, she's a trauma therapist, so she's going to talk about my past, about my trauma, which is true. But I've always listened as a therapist, when am I going to find meaning in their words? Not me. When are they going to find the meaning in the words? And when are they going to make sense of their suffering? And the second a client tells me, Mindy, one day I am going to give back to other teenagers who suffered like I do. One day I'm going to be a teacher because I'm going to help kids, in a way that I wish someone could have helped me. Mindy, I cannot wait to be a mother, that I can parent my kids differently. The second I hear that, it's like I feel like the relief inside of myself, and I think, okay, they got it. I don't need to worry anymore about this client. Once they have found meaning of both their suffering and of how they're going to live their life because of that, that's it, right? They're on a different path.
Yeah, it's really
right?
incredible. Viktor Frankl talks a lot about that healing doesn't come from the self. It comes from going beyond the self. And I think that's probably really resonating with you when you work with clients. You get them to that moment, that shift, that paradigm shift to go beyond the self. You know that the healing is becoming more complete, don't you? It's something which you've experienced, you've seen it with your own eyes.
Yes, yes. And to read it in your book was so magnificent because it was, again, like I want to, I literally just read the book this past week, you know what I'm saying? Before I even know I was going to come on to this podcast. So I really just read the book and I put it into my waiting room. But like there's a list of clients in my mind that I want to tell them, look, we're going to continue our work the way we're doing things because I'm trained differently. So it's hard for me to shift gears. I said, but I want you to buy this book and I want you to read it. And I want you to start doing, because in the back, there's like a workbook. And it's not one of these complicated workbooks. It's so easy. And like, it's so mind shifting, you know? So I said, and I really have some clients that I want to give it to them and say, here, I want you to buy this book and I want you to start doing the workbook, because all the stuff that we've been talking about until now, I think it'll take our work to another level if you can do this. And then hopefully they're going to come back in and it'll give me an opening to work with meaning rather than with the other stuff. So yeah, thank you. It's really a wonderful book.
Thank you so much. And what I noticed, I was reading your biography, your resume. It was so interesting how similar we are in our trainings in therapy. EMDR, I do that. I'm training EMDR. Somatic experiencing, sensory motor therapy, Pat Ogden, IFS, all of that training. So we're actually very parallel in different communities in similar therapies. And one of the things I found interesting, which you talk about in your books, whether it's therapy, schmerapy, or short but lived, is you can only focus on the past so much. At a certain point, you want to transition your clients towards the present and towards the future. What do you think about that idea? Because our trainings as therapists, really, most of psychotherapy, from Sigmund Freud, from up to Aaron Beck, into EMDR, we're all talking a lot about the past. We infrequently talk about the future. What does that mean for you as a therapist? Frankl's idea is to move from the past to the future. What does it represent for you as a therapist?
I'll tell you the truth, in a way, sometimes I come across like a new modality or way of thinking. And I say, I wish I would have known this earlier on. Like when I read your book, like I thought to myself, like I wish that, I know I did read Viktor Frankl those years, but that was not the thrust of our college work or in the reading that I read afterwards. And in a sense, like there's like that feeling of like, oh, I wish I would have been trained or supervised by someone like you, that this would have been the way I would have moved my therapy automatically. And I can't say I won't still do that. It really opened my eyes to a different way of working with therapists. Back to your question, what happens is that when I approach my clients, and I think even with EMDR, sensory motor, somatic experiencing, even IFS, all of them, the access is from the present. So I think that my attitude always was, I tell my client, I only go back to the past, how it impacts the present. So that's really how I think of it. It means I'm only going to access the past if it's going to impact your future. I don't access the past simply to access the past. Yeah. So I think that's always been the way I look at it. So when we do EMDR, it's like what's happening now in your life. When we're doing a somatic experiencing, what's happening right now in your body. And then what happens is that spontaneously something from the past will intrude, and then we work to release that in whichever modality fits for that client, and then to move back into the present. Okay, so now how are we going to work with the present? And the purpose of the present is to lead into a more positive future, the ability to do all those things that person that they're blocked from doing. So yeah, I definitely have that kind of mindset.
Very, very well said. Just a few points about it. I want to mention what you just said. I mean, no one was really trained in logotherapy in our graduate schools that we went to. Viktor Frankl, logotherapy, maybe was mentioned as a reference at the back of a book, maybe, but there was no real studying of Viktor Frankl. It's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because I saw that everybody's read Man's Search for Meaning. When I say everybody, if you haven't read it, you have to go read it, right? Whether you saw it
Yes,
or you
right.
haven't seen it, it's a book about life. And however, a lot of Frankl's writings are very philosophically based. He was a philosopher as well. He also had a PhD in philosophy, on top of being a neurologist and a psychiatrist. So his writings were influenced by existentialism, by philosophy, German philosophy. It's very hard to access. And that was one of the reasons I felt Frankl was not taught enough. People did not know how to bring Frankl into the therapy room with them. And that's why I wrote the book, Viktor Frankl and the Psychology of the Soul. I'm trying to create a structured therapy that we can teach people and say, hey, this is how you do logotherapy with your clients. These are the questions you ask. And in the book, I make this accessible to therapists, to lay people that just want to find more meaning in their lives, to people with depression and anxiety. But it's the learning how to shift towards meaning, which is so incredibly powerful. In fact, I'll tell you, if you were to take your clients, let's say, and only focus on the past, say 10 clients, focus on the past. By the way, I believe we need to focus on the past as well. We need to hear about the past. We need to be informed about the past. But exactly, we concur 100%, as you said, we need to understand the past in as much as it affects our present. That's what we're interested in. But then we need to shift towards meaning. So, excuse me, like, what values do you find are important in your life? What values do you want to live by? Values of kindness, values of being a good citizen, values of spirituality. It's remarkable. If we take those same 10 clients, and then we talk to them about finding values and meaning, I believe we supercharge the therapy process. We give them something to live for. They can utilize. It's not pathologized. The reaching of value system, reaching of virtue. We talk about this in Midos development all the time. Let's take our knowledge of Judaism, Midos, Hashkafa, let's kind of bring that into the session with our clients in a very structured way. We're going to find great long-term results from psychotherapy if we can do that. If we just leave them in the past, we've missed probably half the picture of their development.
I agree. I honestly, the book really resonated with me for that reason. I'm telling you, and I see even with my clients, when they're doing chesed, when they finding meaning in their chesed with their children, with their students, with the ones who are even our therapists, I'm working with their own clients, or when they're doing volunteer work, whatever that volunteer work is, whatever they're doing, they're driving for chesed, they're baking, they're collect clothes, whatever they're doing that they're passionate about, whatever they're involved in, I'm noticing that like alongside their therapy is like kind of like just moving along, because they're not like stuck. They're not stuck in their dysfunction. They're not stuck in their trauma. Their trauma is a piece that they have to work through, but they're working towards health, and the chesed is kind of like driving their health in a very real way. So yeah, it's very, very important. And honestly, the truth is, I see it even for myself. I see it even in my own work. Like you were saying about my book, Short But Lived. Like Short But Lived is this. What happened was that my son was diagnosed when he was 6 years old, and he died when he was 16. And this book is a biography of not so much from my journey, because then I'm writing another book that's coming out of Metz Hashem, Pesach time, which will be called the Hillel series. But this book is really from a teenager's perspective, going through illness and moving towards his death. It's not a depressing book at all. Like I know you read it. Like it's a really upbeat kind of book, because his life was very upbeat. But for me as his mother to write this book, it's like to make meaning of a child suffering and short life. Like when he first got sick and then when he relapsed, it was like the biggest question I had was, how do I make sense? How do I make sense of this suffering? How do I make meaning out of a diagnosis of cancer? Like it completely upended everything I've ever learned as a child, that if you're good things will happen. Yeah, some bad things happen, but like, okay, nothing like this. So it was a very big shock to my system, and really my journey over the next 10 years and further, obviously. At the same time, I was becoming a therapist, because he was diagnosed this summer after my first year of graduate school. So I was actually so it was like the 10 years of being a therapist my first 10 years of being a therapist was completely the same journey as making sense of such a tremendous earth-shattering diagnosis and upheaval in my life. And then it was about making sense of it. And you know something, I'm a much better therapist for it, because one of the questions I had to make sense of was like, okay, is there meaning in life if a person doesn't get married? Is there meaning in life if a person doesn't become a teacher or do great things? Is there meaning in life if a person doesn't have children? You know, and these were like questions that I had to come to terms with. And the answer was absolutely. There's meaning. And I remember like the articles that came out of this that I wrote was like, there's meaning in a life in a coma. A person's existence is valuable enough. Mm-hmm. So it was like, but it was such soul searching to understand, how do I make meaning? I mean, how is he making meaning out of his own life? And that was his journey, because he was a very good kid who actually was he loved learning. He loved Torah. He loved mitzvahs. He was very connected to Hashem. That was his journey. And he found his own meaning in what he did in his life. And he created a lot of meaning for his life. And then I had to create meaning from my understanding, which was very helpful for me as my personal life for sure, and as a therapist. So yeah, that to me was really, it was a real journey to find meaning in it. And then I don't know if the third book that I wrote was actually Hillel and the Paper Menchies, which is like behind me as well. And that was a children's book based on my son's experiences in the hospital, but in a cartoon comic kind of way, in which I wanted to help kids who are going through challenges. So that was like another way that I made meaning of his journey by taking, we had made it when he was going through radiation treatment. I had invented for him like these quadruplets who had a lot of adventures. And while he was doing radiation, it was like a 45-minute thing. He had to be alone in a room having the radiation without me there. And he was 6 years old. So from outside the room, I was like telling him stories about these paper menchies. And I created a book about it. So it's just like a freewheeling, whimsical, like a fantasy, imaginative kind of book that also came out of our experiences and wanting to do something with it in order to help other people, help other kids, make meaning of it. So yeah, all of my life, even before my son, has been about making meaning, and definitely with this, even more so.
And the whole book is about meaning. And I just want to tell you, you're an incredible writer. The fact that you remembered so many details almost day by day for many years, for me, was remarkable. The way you described it was absolutely remarkable. And I just want to tell the readers also, it's uplifting, but you're going to cry. I mean, you're going to cry when I cried a lot when Hillel speaks in the book. To watch this young man at such a young age with such an advanced understanding of life and meaning and Torah and Hashkafa and Emunah. He was absolutely remarkable. He also, in the book, at the end, you have his tzava. Before he passed away, he wrote a tremendous testimony. And it's his level of Emunah was absolutely remarkable. And everybody should read this book that wants to understand what it means to be a human being, what it means to be a parent, what it means to love, and what it means to be able to overcome suffering. Frankl talked about the third level of meaning is when you're facing inescapable suffering. An inescapable situation like Auschwitz or what your son experienced, and what you're left with is you can change your attitude towards it. I think that's what you're teaching in the book. You were able to shift attitudes. You did that. Your son did that as well. So kol kavod for a really incredible book. But I want to ask you as a human being, Mindy, how were you able to do that? How were you able to respond to a very painful situation with the attitude of trying to find more meaning? How did you grow up? What skills did you have growing up? What attitudes? I think you probably learned from somebody in your past or something you picked up in school. What gives you the ability to do that?
It's so interesting because I actually think I wonder myself. First of all, I grew up a child of Holocaust survivors. And both my grandparents, both sets of grandparents, were also Holocaust survivors. And not that anyone talked about the Holocaust necessarily, but I think it was just like embedded into our system, not anything depressing, because all the grandparents, even though there were extended family that perished in Auschwitz, my immediate family went through the Holocaust, but they weren't in Auschwitz. So they were like they were in Theresienstadt, they were in DP camps, they were different difficult situations. So somehow there was simply this attitude. It sounds so trite to say it, but like if you have lemons, make lemonade. I know it sounds so cliched, but it was really that kind of attitude. It was like all the people in my life, that's how they went through life. There were lemons, they were really sour, and now we're going to make lemonade. We'll add some sugar, and we're going to live very rich lives. And when I look back, I mean, my parents are both still alive, Baruch Hashem. When I look back at both sets of grandparents, there was like a joie de vivre. There was like a joy of life that they all had, each in their own way of how they were grandparents to us, how they lived their life. Like even like when I think about them, I have such funny and fun memories of my grandparents, of just everything about it. So I definitely, looking back now as a mature adult, there was definitely embedded into my childhood just this solidness of like terrible things can happen, but that doesn't mean life is terrible. I think that was one thing. I think there was also another piece. I think there was another piece of being a child of immigrants was not the easiest thing in the world. I mean, just like as a silly example, my mother thought that if I sat detention, that means I was getting expelled from school. She had no idea. So I had to sneak out almost every morning in the morning and say, "Hi, Mom, going to study." Now, and because I didn't want to lie, right, because I couldn't lie to save my life, I actually saved my test studying for detention. So I studied for like the hour. That's when I studied, and I went to detention. I didn't say a lie, but my mother didn't know that I was saying detention because, like, to her, it was like, "You're going to get expelled." And how do you explain to your mother, "No, Ma, it's not about being expelled. I was late 5 minutes to class, and that's why I said detention." So I think also like this, I had to figure out ways in order to make my life work that I could stay true to myself, but yet not cause, chaos or too much chaos. I caused enough chaos as a teenager, but not too much chaos. I think there was a little bit of that. And there was a resiliency that I reached out to many different people to learn about how to live life. Definitely teachers, definitely friends. I definitely found a lot of people in my life that I was able to reach out to and say, "How does life work? How does it go?" Making decisions about, if I wanted a husband to sit and learn, if I wanted to live in a certain place, I wanted to have a certain career, if I wanted to do certain things. So I think those were all, they were all kind of like helped me work towards what I need to do in life. And then when my son got sick, it was like as if nothing made sense, as if there was no meaning. And then I had to like start again, like to build that Lego set of like, okay, what did I learn in school again? Like, what was that I learned about Hashem being in charge of the world? What was that my teacher said? The modeling of my parents. What was this about the Holocaust again? Like, is this the same Holocaust my father went through that I'm going through? Like, and he said, "Mindy, we didn't pray to survive. We just prayed to survive for one more day." So is this what he's talking about? This is the Holocaust he went through that I didn't know about? That now, like, with my own Holocaust, like, I'm going to take those lessons? So I think it was like that's what happened. Like all those, whatever I was growing up with, it was like suddenly I could either just dump it into the garbage or like start building those Lego pieces again. And you know what it's like when you, like, the kids build this like huge Lego thing, and then by mistake, like another little kid comes and bangs it and then they start crying, it's all broken. And you say, no, it's not broken. Look, this whole piece is still here. This whole piece is still here. That whole piece is there. And it's and you don't have to start from the beginning. Just like put it together and you have your whole Lego thing again. And I think that's what it was like. It wasn't like everything got shot, but it was like, hold on, the whole Lego building that I built is all gone. But no, that whole piece is still here. The foundation is here. It's just like just a few pieces scattered.
I would say that's remarkable. I'd say there's three things you just mentioned. One is that you're a person of chachma, meaning you want to learn from other people. So you're going to seek out information as you grew up, and you're going to try to apply that in life. So you went back and thought, what did the Holocaust really mean? How did people get over it? all the stuff we learned in yeshiva about Emunah, what is Chazal talking about? I better apply it right now if I want to get through this. That was remarkable. And there's two other things that I think you just mentioned. One is you looked at Lego and as a metaphor. Lego is a metaphor, isn't it? You could build something up. You're 5 years old. You build this incredible tower. You could spend 10 hours building it, and somebody comes over and just knocks it all down. Your brother or sister comes with their bicycle to the living room, whatever. They just kick it with their legs, and the whole thing tumbles on the floor. So you have to make a choice. Do I fall apart from the Lego being broken, this masterpiece I built, or do I just rebuild it again? So I think that's one of the things you took from life is you can always rebuild Lego. Life's like an advanced Lego set as well. And the second thing I think you mentioned really was your father's attitude that we didn't pray too much in the future. We prayed for one day. Is that something you were aware of when you're dealing with your son? Did your father's voice come to you? Or is it something that you grew up with?
I didn't realize it until what happened is that it was like the last year of his life, and he was very, very sick at that point, and he had like a horrible episode. He landed in the hospital. And I actually wrote this in an article for age.com where it was published under the Holocaust Club. And I said, like, my father is like part of that Holocaust Club, I wrote in that article that I explained that when I went to visit him, because he doesn't do hospitals. So I came to visit him instead. And, he has a store on 16th Avenue. So I passed by the store on the way to work. My husband stayed in the hospital. I passed by my father's store and I went in. And my father said then, he says, like, I have a poem of nothing. Like, it was just like, I have tears even just like thinking of him saying it, because it was such a precious story to me. And he says, Mindy, he said in Yiddish, when we were there and the bombs were falling, he says, we didn't daven. We didn't pray for life. We didn't pray for that we're going to like be rescued. He says, we just prayed for one more day. That's it, one more day. And it just like struck me how strongly when he said that, like, that's it, just one more day. Like, we don't need to think of the future. It's like right now. Is Hillel okay right now? Is he davening right now? Is he talking now? Is he with me right now? That's all I need to know. I whatever's going to be, I can handle one day at a time. And I don't know, I didn't realize how strong that message was to me. It's simply one day at a time. Like, now he's okay. Because I actually knew when he relapsed that he's not going to survive.
Yeah, I saw that towards the last third of the book. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, they tried some last-minute drug, an experimental drug, which seemingly reduced the tumor temporarily. There was some recession of the tumor, but then it came back. And that was I think it's chapter 36 or 37. There's a real shift that takes place in this book, like preparing for the end and the pain that you must have been going through. I want to mention one more thing about your son, if I may, that I think your father's attitude in the camps, your attitude with Lego, transferred onto Hillel's attitude as well. And I think that's where the tears for me started flowing when I started hearing this young man with such developed emunah, such remarkable emotional skills to deal with what he was dealing with. Could you talk about that for a minute? Hillel's strengths?
Yeah, I will. I'll tell you one thing. My husband never read Viktor Frankl in his life. He never heard of him, never read him. He's a Hasidic guy. It was not in his circles. But I'll never forget when we were in the hospital. I went to the emergency room, and in the hospital, my husband had he said, Mindy, everything's okay. And I said, yeah. I said, when you finish work, just come over and get me. And in the middle of that, I found out that he had cancer, and my husband came. And when he walked in, I said, it's cancer. And I'll never forget, first, it was the shock. And then one of the first things he told me, he says, Mindy, he says, we have no control over what will happen, but we have control how we're going to react to it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of there we go. That's it. And then I remember what I had read in Viktor Frankl's book, but he was the one that reminded me first. And I think that's really what it was. Like, we have control over how we're going to react to it. And yeah, my Hillel actually, I always say as a therapist over and over, children react as the parent does. However, we're going to react to something, a child is going to take that same attitude in. So yeah, Hillel had that same attitude. He lived for the day. He lived, he did what he wanted to do. He did what he needed to do. He was learning. He was davening. He was having fun. He was reading Harry Potter. Like he went. He was building his own life. He very much lived in the present, and actually thought about the future as well. But his future was more about his olam haba. He had a whole plan of how he's going to finish Mishnayos, how he's going to finish Gemara, how he's going to finish this, how he wants to do this. But he was actually doing it. It wasn't a plan that one day he's going to finish it. He was actually in the present, had a whole system of what he was learning in order to complete the Gemara. He actually did not complete the Gemara, and his friends completed it for him for his yahrzeit. They finished, the whole entire thing for him. But he was doing it. And he also lived life. He loved like the Thursday nights singing and schmoozing and challenged with his friends, and then he had late night learning, and then his shvuos throughout the whole entire night he was learning. He did his thing. He really just did his thing, and he would and a part of him, I think for all of us, a part of us is like, maybe he'll be the miracle that's going to survive, and he'll be the first one of his brain tumor that's going to survive. And the other part was, and if not, we're going to live life the way that it is, and it could be good. So I think he lives with both realities as well. That, who am I going to get married to? Who's marrying somebody with cancer? And the other one is like, I might not make it, and I'm going to live my life in case I don't. Like, I think both were in front of him all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was a great kid. I want to tell you, the book is, I hear what you're saying, that you cried by the book in some parts, and I'm touched, and thank you for saying that. But there were a lot of funny parts about the book as well. There were a lot of people who told me, oh, Mindy, I couldn't believe it. I actually laughed in a lot of places in the book, because he was a funny kid. He had a great sense of humor. He was fun and funny. When he was already bar mitzvah, he hung out at his married cousin's house and baked cookies on a snowy day with the little nieces and with his little cousins. He was a real person. He just, he enjoyed the Harry Potter, and he took one of those tests to like which sorting house would he belong to, and he goes, I'm Ravenclaw. Yeah, I'm like the smart ones. Like, he knew who he was. Yeah, he just he loved schmoozing with his friends. He loved having fun. And then, of course, he was a regular teenager too. Like, when one day, I don't know what it was, that my husband said something to him about him coming home so late, and what's the matter with you, and coming home so late, and he got a little tear in his eye, and he goes, yeah, you guys don't love me. I'm thinking, really now? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what a teenager. But then, it's like, and then my husband just grabbed him in a hug, and there was nothing else to say,
It was like he lived a full life in the 16 years.
Very full. Yeah, he did.
What a wonderful thought to think about. He lived a full life in the 16 years, even though he didn't have more years to accomplish, where he accomplished so much in that time.
Yeah. That's actually what it feels like, the meaning of his life, that it was short for me, but those 16 years were so full. It was a rich life. It was a rich, good life. And I think he thinks the same way. I think he thought the same way. He had a good life.
And that was the attitude which helped him get through this, wasn't it? Fully living life to the best he could. He seems to be what just like Viktor Frankl, he would squeeze out opportunities. When things looked difficult, he would squeeze out just another inch of life, another meaningful moment, another opportunity to learn. It was always this wonderful, optimistic, joyful attitude towards things, in spite of his suffering.
Yes, I'll tell you the truth. I was actually shocked when I interviewed his friends for the last part of the book, because I didn't know him as a teenager. So I literally interviewed 50 people, his rabbeim, his friends. And I actually had no idea how much he was learning. I knew he learned a lot. I knew he was a masmid, but I'll tell you the truth is like he also schmoozed with us. Like he sat around, he played with his nieces and nephews. Like it wasn't, I knew he was a huge masmid and a huge talent chacham, but I didn't realize the depth of it. I didn't realize that because he wasn't sleeping, he was literally learning every second. Like because I had no idea. I mean, I knew that he had a hard time sleeping, but I thought that he fell asleep at a normal time. I thought that he got up at 5 o'clock and he started to learn. I didn't realize that he was literally thinking and learning all the time. I didn't realize that he was actually staying up at night in his room. I didn't realize that he was making chavrusas until 12 o'clock at night, and then in between by lunch, and then by recess. And like he was literally making like little chavrusas all over the place. But I have to tell you something. I'm not surprised because before he was 6 years old, before he was diagnosed, he finished the entire Sefer Tehillim as a pre-1A child, and he finished it in all his little recesses. You know, like whenever he had a chance as a pre-1A kid, they had just learned how to read that year, and so that was even before any of the cancer came along. He had done that, you know, and then of course we made a scene for him, and made a big deal about it, but. And then, so he was doing that his whole entire life. So so he did squeeze out every single opportunity of his life, both in Avodas Hashem, in his learning, and in a Simchas Achayim, to really enjoy life with Chalent and with the Leil Shishi, and, and all of it. You know, he really did all of it.
Yeah, incredible story. It seems like you're also squeezing out every moment of life professionally. I mean, you're doing so much. You're writing books. You're seeing clients. You're editing. What's the magazine you work for now? You edit the.
I write. I'm a columnist in Bina magazine. And then like in Links also. Like I edit my own stuff, but I'm actually a writer. And I also speak. I lecture for different. I'm a motivational speaker. I do educational.
Yes, on top of that, right? Yeah, I mentioned I wasn't sure the publications because you also referenced Hamodia at some point. You still write for Hamodia, or now it's mostly?
I write for Bina. Hamodia is like the parent company of Bina. I write for Bina. Yeah. Yeah,
but you get so much done, and then you said you like biking and you do other things that are fun in your life, and I'm just wondering. So your clients must really enjoy spending time with you because you're probably very helpful and lively and give like a lot of insight and talk about like living life to its fullest. I was just wondering, you mentioned that your son's diagnosis and the treatment over many years was happening when you were becoming a therapist. So how do you feel now that it's helped you become the therapist you are today, living through that experience?
It's a great question. First of all, I find meaning differently than I found it beforehand. Mm-hmm. That meaning for me, first of all, is not accomplishing great things. It's simply accomplishing this, whatever it is that brings meaning to that person's life in whichever way it is. It can be the smallest of things. So the grandiosity that beforehand, it was like meaning, like doing great things. So to me, meaning is really like tiny, tiny pieces of Lego, like those like really small pieces that like the kids could swallow. That how small meaning is. Second of all, like what our community considers meaning, which definitely is meaningful, doesn't define meaning. And I found in the Torah, there's a much greater definition. We become a little bit conformist, that only being married and having children is meaningful. Like someone who's single, who wasn't zocha to have a spouse or children, like their lives are not meaningful. Or if they're not working outside of the house, if they spent their whole life being mothers, that can't be meaningful. So like to me, that kind of stereotype really has gone into the garbage. Like to me, I have come in contact with the most remarkable of human beings who have not married for various reasons, through no fault of their own, obviously, or not zocha to children, and they lead such meaningful, rich lives. Of course, their pain is real, but and the meaning of their lives enriches my life as well. Like they've expanded my life with the meaning that they've imbued in their lives. So that's like those are huge. The stereotypes of our community, that has helped me to break past that. There's another piece that has helped me both professionally and personally, that I am able to say things that I would never have dared say before. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if somebody has a tragedy happening to them in my personal life, I am completely comfortable calling up and saying, I'm so sorry about X, Y, Z, how are you doing? Even though I don't speak to that person, but I feel very comfortable doing that. And I don't think someone who hasn't gone through something is able to do that. And the same thing as a therapist. I find it much easier to talk about death and dying and trauma and all kinds of terrible things because it's okay. And then sometimes I also find that I could push the envelope. I will use self-disclosure in the room in order to push the envelope. And I might say something like, I'm trying to think of an example. I might say something like, I remember when my son was dying, or I remember my son was sick. I remember I had no energy to actually make supper or do anything else. And I'm wondering if that's something that's happening to you too. Meaning because some people feel so broken, or they're something's wrong with them if they can't do this or they can't do that. And I'll be able to share with them. And for my clients who know that my son died, a lot of them tell me that I read your articles or I know, and I'll say something like, what's it like to tell me your story? Sometimes clients think, oh, what am I telling Mindy about? What happened? I didn't get the job, and here her son has cancer. And I said, I want to let you know that your story is just as important. I don't feel in the least bit. I'm able to kind of put it out there and just say it, and then they're able to both take in that their story is important and also to put it into perspective that in the long run, they'll get another job, they'll be okay, they'll be fine. And in a way, I'll be able to weave it in. So there are different things that I will use my story because I know that they know. I'll do it only for clients who actually know. And then, so we could use it. And then I'll all of a sudden, and then for sure I'll use it as meaning. I'll say, yeah, when my son got diagnosed, it's my whole world collapsed and I have to find meaning. How do you find, and I'll say and how do you find meaning? So, I've been working on it since then,
So your message to other therapists is a little bit of carefully chosen self-disclosure, which reveals your humanness and your own vulnerabilities, can be very effective sharing that with other people and your clients.
Yes. And very much in context of meaning, very much in context of meaning of I had to create meaning. I got a partner in Torah. I started to write. That's when I started to write. I just needed to find meaning and how to, and the truth is all of us, these horrible things happen to you, and I'm wondering, and then I guess I need an opening to be able to find that meaning. But when we have these kind of conversations, it makes it easier for my clients to talk about meaning in their life and to go further with it.
It makes a lot of sense because if you were to visit Viktor Frankl as a patient, 40, 50 years ago, you knew his story, the famous survivor of Auschwitz. It wasn't like he had to do much self-disclosure. His self-disclosure was written in many books and translated into 25 languages around the world. I'm assuming, therefore, to meet with him, it was different meeting with him than somebody else. He was on a different level because you knew he went through something, and he was a living example of finding meaning in spite of his environment, in spite of his suffering. So it sounds like when people come to you because of your books, Short But Lived, and all your writings, that people also understand that about you. It's made you more effective, actually, in the long term, because you do talk about what you've been through, and that's okay. It's okay to share your story.
Yeah. It's given meaning. It has given meaning to my life to be able to share it. And with my clients as well. So as a therapist, I'm really I'm always with the ethics of it, there's a lot of talk about the ethics of self-disclosure and especially in a major way, but I'm really careful with it. And the truth is I found that it's been really helpful. And I'm sure there are some clients who have felt uncomfortable. I know there's one client that for a year, she wouldn't talk about her own loss because she was afraid that it'll cause pain to me. And that was part of our work. It was part of our work. And that was okay too.
That's great.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I just want to close off with a quote from your son, Hillel Blumenfeld, at age 16. This is what he said. He said, it's in your prologue, "You know how life is full of ups and downs. Well, death is one down and the rest is up." What a remarkable, it sounds like Viktor Frankl, actually. But what a remarkable statement that he made at such an incredible young age. So I really hope that from here on, that the rest is up for you and your family. His memory is up for everybody, and that people read your book and really learn how to live a life fully in spite of what they've gone through. They can still find meaning. They can find happiness and contentment. And I want to thank you for all your tremendous work, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, and thank you for really your book. It was such a wonderful way to spend my Shabbos afternoon, I must tell you. Thank you for bringing logotherapy in such a reader-friendly, applicable way. It's really a gift. Thank you.